Welcome back to another class on the treasures of Mishnayot. We are in Mishnayot of Berachot, in Perek Zayin Mishnah. All of this is a new chapter, chapter 7 in Mishnah 1. This will be part 1 of the Shi'ur. Today we want to speak about two concepts. There's many more, but we want to just stick to two because each one needs to be explained. The Mishnah is going to start speaking about Shelosha shachlu ke'echad, chayavin lezamen. If you have three people that ate bread together, they are as one, they are obligated to do Zimun. Zimun, the literal translation of Zimun, is to invite. The question is, how does one invite? By saying, Nevarech sha'alchanu mishalom. For example, Reuven, Shimon, Levi sat down to have a bread meal. They went to the pizza store, or they went out to have a lafa, whatever it might be. They sat down, both three of them, to eat bread. Reuven is not allowed to start saying Birkat Hamazon until he does Zimun. So remember, throughout the Shi'ur, whenever we're going to speak about Zimun, remember that it's referring to Nevarech Shalchan Mishol. That's how you're going to invite them. You're going to tell them, Nevarech Shalchan Mishol, come, let's bless from the one that we ate the food from, meaning from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's how you invite them to go ahead and be able to say Birkat Hamazon. So one more time, if Reuven, Shimon, and Levi sat down to have a bread meal, not one of them is able to get up before they do Zimun. Once he does Zimun, then he's able to say Birkat Hamazon, and afterwards he's allowed to leave. Now you might think that this case is not practical, but it's very practical. Why? A lot of times especially when you go to a Brit Milah or a Bar Mitzvah, that you don't even know the people that you're eating with, it's very uncomfortable to say, okay, hello, did you eat bread? Did you eat bread? Can I do Zimun with you? If you don't know the people, you're going to have a very big problem, because now, since you sat down together with them to eat the bread on the same table, even though you don't know them, the sitting itself establishes the place that it's saying that as if we're all eating one and together. Since that is the case, you can't get up now and leave. That you're not allowed to do. Meaning you can't say Birkat Hamazon and leave wherever you want to go. That you're not allowed to do. Rather, what you have to do, you really have to ask two people. Even better if you have 10 people, because by 10 people you have to say Elokeinu. You have to say Nevarech Elokeinu Shachal Mishol, which gives more honor to Hashem. Whatever it is, 3 or 10 people, if you're able to get them, you have to first go ahead and say the Zimun, and then you could start saying Birkat Hamazon, and only then can you go about your day. But to sit down with a group of people while they're eating bread and you sat with them together, then to go ahead and say Birkat Hamazon without doing the Zimun, that, Rabotai, is not allowed. And this is what the Mishnah is going to come to teach us today, Be'ezrat Hashem, as point number 1. Shelosha she'achlu ke'echad. If you have 3 people that they ate bread together, chayavin lezamen, they are all obligated to do Zimun. Zimun means to invite. How do you invite? By saying, Nevarech Shalchanu Mishalom. Now, Rabotai, there is an eitzah that the Chachamim, they give us how to avoid this problem. Especially when you're eating with people that, you don't know if they're going to answer, they're not going to answer, or, you're not comfortable. So there is an advice that they give to go around this situation. For example, if I have to sit in a Brit Milah or a Bar Mitzvah in the morning, and I know I don't have the time to sit around, so I'll just wash my hands for bread, and then I'm on a bench and leave, 99% of the time, I'll be able to get somebody to be able to do Zimun. It's not a problem. However, but let's say I'm in a situation where I can't, whatever it is, I can't get their attention to be able to do Zimun. So if I know that's going to be the situation, when I wash my hands before I come sit down to eat the bread, in my mind, I have a negative kavanah. What does it mean, negative kavanah? I have in my mind that I want nothing to do with these people. When I'm sitting down on this table, I'm not sitting down to have a bread meal with them. I'm sitting down as if I'm by myself. So once I exclude them, which is the negative kavanah, once I exclude them, now I don't have to worry about the obligation to do Zimun. So if I have to go, or if it's hard for me to get their attention, I could say Birkat Hamazon and get up and leave. However, if I did not have that intention, that negative kavanah, that I am excluding them from my bread meal, meaning I don't want to sit down with them together on the same table, and I'm a part of their meal. If I did not have that intention, I'm not allowed to get up and say Birkat Hamazon and then leave and go on about my day. That I'm not allowed to do. So that's why we have to be very careful that whenever you're sitting to eat with three people, whether it's you, whether it's the person in front of you, doesn't matter. Nobody's allowed to get up and leave the place. So if Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are sitting, not one of them is allowed to say Birkat Hamazon until one of them does Zimun. Okay. The Mishnah is going to bring down, how do we know that there's an obligation? Meaning, from where do we know that three people is the minimum in order to be able to do Zimun? From where do we know it? So the Mishnah is going to bring us two pasukim from Tanakh. One is going to be Gadul la Hashem iti. Come and let's bring greatness to Hashem with me. V'narmamo shemo yachdav. And let's make his name great. If you pay close attention, he says Gadul la Hashem iti. Let's make Hashem's name great with me. With me is one. Gadulu is 2 and 3. So now you have over here altogether 3 people. In the verse it tells you, when do you start giving Hashem praise? Like by saying, Nevarech Shalchanu Mishalo. When do you say, let's come and bless Hashem from his food that we ate? When do you do it? Specifically when you have 3 people. How do I know? Because the pasuk says, Gadulu la Hashem iti. Let's come and let's make Hashem's name great with me. 1. Gadulu is plural. Minimum for plural has to be 2 people. So you have 2 and 3. So over here you have automatically 3 people in this verse. And now come, let's make his name great. So we see from over here, in order to be able to do Zimun, minimum you have to have 3 people. The next pasuk, Kishem Hashem Ekra. Havu gadol al kenu. When I'm going to call out to Hashem's name, Ekra, I will call out, which is 1. Havu gadol Elohim. Let's bring greatness to Hashem. Havu, it means let's, meaning plural again. The minimum for plural is 2 people. So it comes out of here. Also, you're going to have 3 people. So it comes out in this teaching that in order to be able to do Zimun, we see from this 2 verses in Tanakh that you have to have 3 people in order to be able to do Zimun. If you're by yourself or you have 2 people, there's no reason to do Zimun. This only falls if you have minimum 3 people and more. It's just once you reach 10 people, it's no longer Nevarech Shalchanu Mishalo, but it's Nevarech Elokeinu Shalchanu Mishalo, because you have to add over there the word our God. Fine. Now, this is one point that we're going to want to see Be'ezrat Hashem in the Mishnah. Point number 2, which is very important, which is Demai. Now, in order to be able to understand what Demai is, I believe we went over this one time in one of the previous classes. I just teach so much during the day. I don't know if it was this class or another class. Doesn't matter. But I'm going to go over this right now again, just for us to have it. And then we're going to go and try to understand what is Demai. And that's the 2 points that we want to actually go ahead and focus on today, Be'ezrat Hashem. So let's put it like this. Tevel, what does Tevel mean? Tevel is produce where no donation has been given yet. Meaning in Hebrew it's called Ma'asarot. We'll see, you have to give to a Kohen, Levi, and a poor person, so on and so forth. I will explain it right now. But Tevel means that no Ma'asarot were given yet. Meaning to say that no donation from his produce was given yet. Produce could have been from wheat or from fruits. Majority of the times it was from wheat. So let's say over here you have Reuven, who is the owner of the produce of wheat, for example. He's not allowed to eat tevel. Tevel again is produce where no donation has been given yet. If you go ahead right now, let's say you made 10 piles of produce of wheat, which is tevel, and you decided to go ahead and from that wheat to go grind, sift, make it into flour, and then make yourself bread. When you come to eat that bread now, you're chayav mitah. You're not allowed to eat produce from tevel. Before you give your donations, you're not allowed to touch tevel. B'ezrat Hashem, we'll see this later on in the Mishnah. I'm just trying to give you an overview in one shot over here. So, Reuven is the owner of, let's say, the field. He has 10, let's say whatever it is, he had 10 piles of wheat that he collected, which is called tevel. Reuven has to first go ahead before doing anything. He has to give a truma gidolah. Truma, what does truma mean? Truma literally means donation. he has to give a big donation, which is really 1% belonging to a Kohen. Even though it sounds big, there's no measurement. It's really 1 out of 50. But Truma Gadol is basically like around 1%, which belongs to a Kohen. Maaser Rishon comes next. After Reuven gave Truma Gadol, the 1% to the Kohen, Reuven now has to go ahead and he has to give Maaser Rishon, which is 10% to a Levi. So you know something? Maybe I should do it like this. Maybe it will be easier like this. Let's do it like this. Let's make it like this. Tevel is 100% produce. Where if a person ate it, he is, let's put it right over here, he is chayav mita. Okay? So you have to go ahead and you have to give Truma Gedola, which is going to leave the owner 99%. After you give the Truma Gedola, now you have to give Maaser Rishon from here. So now, once you give Maaser Rishon, which is again, this Maaser means 10, Rishon, the first 10% belongs to the Levi. 10% goes to the Levi. So now you're down to 89%. After Reuven went ahead and he gave Truma Gedola and Maaser Rishon, when I speak about it like that, when I say Truma Gedola and Maaser Rishon, Rabotai, have in mind the numbers and know who it goes to. It just makes the learning much more better and sweeter when you do it one shot in Hebrew. So once Reuven gave Truma Gedola and Maaser Rishon, now Levi has an obligation to give Terumat Maaser. Now this is very important. What is Terumat Maaser? Terumat means again donation, Maaser of the 10%. Why is this called Terumat Maaser? Because what did Reuven give to Levi? He gave him Maaser Rishon, the 10%. So now Levi is obligated to go ahead and now give Terumah, a donation, from that 10% that he received. So Levi has to go ahead and he has to give to the Kohen 10%, which in reality he's basically giving 1%, because from 10% it's really 1%. Meaning, from 10% of what I receive, if I'm giving 10% from that, one more time, from the 10% that I received, and I have to give 10% from the 10% that I received, all you're giving is really 1%. So this is called the Terumat HaMaaser. Just keep that in mind. This is very, very important to know. Who does this? The Levi. Levi has to give it to the Kohen. So Reuven gives Truma Gedola. Reuven gives Maaser Rishon. Again, Truma Gedola goes to the Kohen. Maaser Rishon goes to the Levi. Now we're switching off to Levi. Now Levi has an obligation from his Maaser Rishon to give Terumat HaMaaser, to give donation from this 10% to the Kohen. So he has to give 10% to the Kohen, which in reality is 1%. So what's going to end up happening is that if the Levi received, let's say 10%, now he has to go ahead and he has to give the Kohen, going back to the Kohen, he has to give 1%. So in reality, the Levi is left with 9%. Okay? So Reuven, as of now, has 89% of produce. Levi has 9% of produce. Now we're switching back to Reuven. After Reuven gave Truma Gedola and Maaser Rishon, jump straight to Maaser Sheni. One more time. Maaser, the 10%. Sheni, the second 10% that Reuven has to give. However, this second 10% belongs to himself. La'atzmo, it's for himself. Tzarich le'echol b'Yerushalayim, and he needs to eat it in Yerushalayim. Now, in order to be able to understand when is Maaser Sheni given, we need to know that there's a Shemitah cycle of 7 years. You have 7-year cycle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, in this 7-year cycle, you can't give Maaser Sheni whenever you want. There are years that if you harvested on that year, that's when you're going to go ahead and give Maaser Sheni. For example, Maaser Sheni could only be given on year 1, 2, 4, and 5. That's it. That means to say that if I would harvest the produce on year 5, that's when I'm giving Maaser Sheni. But who am I giving the Maaser Sheni to? To myself. What am I going to do with it? I have an obligation to take it up to Yerushalayim and eat the food over there, this produce over there. So it comes out again, from 89%, then he gives 10% to himself, where he can't just do whatever, meaning he can't eat it outside of Yerushalayim. So basically he's left with right now 79%, even though really it's not a loss because it's going to him. Nevertheless, now he's basically down to 79%. Now there is also another maaser that Reuven has to give. Now this maaser oni, again, 10% of an oni, of a poor person. This and this are interchangeable. Maaser oni is given to a poor person when on year number 3 and year number 6. That means that if I harvested the produce on year 3 or 6, I don't give Maser Sheni because it's not on year 1, 2, 4, or 5. But I have to give now Maser Oni because it's on year 3 and 6. So that's the rule. Whichever year you're harvesting, that is what you're going to go ahead and see if it's Maser Sheni or Maser Oni. The only difference is that he's always going to be down to 79%. Always going to be down to 79%. The only difference is with Maser Sheni on year 1, 2, 4, and 5, he's really holding 89% of the produce by him. It's just the other 10, he has to eat it in Yerushalayim. But on year 3 and 6, he's really losing Rabotai. He's really down to 79%, almost like about a 31% bracket of taxes. Right? I think today's like what, 33 now? I'm not even sure how much it is now. But this is his bracket. 31% of his produce would have to be given away. Then Rabotai is able to go ahead and have his produce. But you see how this works. This is the breakdown. So I'm going to do it in Hebrew one more time. Reuven has tevel. Anybody who eats tevel, chayav mita. Reuven has to give truma gedola and maaser rishon. Levi has to give trumat maaser. Reuven has to give maaser sheni on year 1, 2, 4, and 5. And Reuven has to give maaser oni on year 3 and 6. Now that we know that, we can move on to this board, to this side of the board. Now, we're going to speak about today, Bezrat Hashem B'Leneder, as the second point of Demai. I just showed you over there the process that the owner of the field, what he goes through. The Gemara is going to speak about, not the Gemara, the Mishnah is going to speak about, you had some Ameh Haaretz. Ameh Haaretz doesn't necessarily mean ignorant people. There are many definitions, but Am Haaretz literally means the nation of the land. But it's not a good terminology. So I just keep it in Am Haaretz. You want to learn as an ignorant person, that also you can learn. You want to learn a person who's not learned, that also you can learn. There's many things that make a person Am Haaretz. Is not only not knowing Torah. You could learn Torah, but if you don't do other things, there's also you could be called an Am Haaretz. Nevertheless, Rabotai, what is Demai? This guy Reuven, let's say this guy Reuven is an Am Haaretz. We're going to see that Am Haaretz, we suspected them are not giving the Ma'asarot correctly. Whenever I say the word Ma'asarot, you have to understand that it's going back on what I showed you on the previous page. When it comes to Truma Gedolo, Maser Rishon, Maser Sheni, Trumat HaMaser, Maser Oni. Right, so what do we have? Truma Gedola, Maser Rishon, Trumat HaMaser, Maser Sheni, and Ma'aser Oni. 5 things you have to remember. Those are all the Maserot, and each one accordingly has to be given in its years. However, Rabot, I want to make a very important point. An Am Haaretz, when you're dealing with an Am Haaretz, since he knows that if he is tevel, it's from the Torah, he's going to be chayav mita, so he's not going to play with it. So you know what he does? He does a very bare minimum, because once he gives the Truma Gedol, which belongs to the Kohen, once he gives the 1%, he's fine with that, he's happy with that. He's not going to get chayav mita because he really gave a portion of his produce away. Nevertheless, came the Chachamim, they said, this Am Haaretz, that went out and only gave Truma Gedola, but did not give Maaser Rishon, and he also did not give Maaser Sheni, that is going to be a problem for the people that are going to go ahead and purchase products from him. For example, a person, this specifically applies in Eretz Yisrael, a person right now goes and he wants to buy food or fruits or bread or any wheat product from an Am Haaretz. Now we suspect them that they did not give Maaser Rishon and they don't give Maaser Sheni. Since they don't give it, you could go ahead and buy it, but now the obligation is placed on you to give it. We'll see it as we go along. So let's just do this one more time. I just want to make sure that this is clear. Reuven is an Amaretz. Reuven has an obligation to go ahead and give all this. On year number 5, Reuven, I'm just giving an example. Reuven went, he gave Truma Gedola, but he did not give Maaser Rishon, which belongs to the Levi. And he didn't take Maaser Sheni, which belongs to himself. He didn't do that. So now, another person that goes out and he buys from him, you're not allowed to eat that produce until you go ahead and you start separating the necessary Maaserot. So, now that we know that, the Mishnah is going to go to right now break down what does Demai mean. Demai, if you take the word Demai and you break it down to 2 words, Demai, that's in Aramaic. In Hebrew, it's Ze Mahu. What is this? Meaning to say, this produce that I just brought from the Amaretz, what is it? Me'usar or lo me'usar? Were the 10% given or were they not given? Meaning to say, were the Ma'asarot of Maaser Rishon and Sheni given or were they not given? Remember Maaser Rishon and Maaser Sheni. So this is one way to understand. Whenever we say the word Demai, it all literally comes down to the same thing. It's just how there's 3 different versions. You can understand what Demai means. So the first way we're going to see Demai is Demai. Ze Mahu. What is this? Meaning to say, is it Musar or lo Musar? Were the Masarot given or not? That is one way to see it. Another way to see it, we can see Demai. The word Demai comes from the word Dimui vihirhur. Imagination and thought. Meaning to say, we have to question it. Were the Masarot given or not? Another word for Demai is, it comes from, I believe it's a Greek word. We'll see it right now. It's called Demai, it's called Dimus, which means Amhamon, which means it's the Tivua, it's the wheat product of the regular nation, meaning of an Amaretz. So basically, in all these 3 cases, you have Demai, Demai, Demai. They all have the common denominator of speaking about an Amaretz, whether you give the Maser or not. It's just, how do you want to learn it? Zemahu, is it imagination or hirur, or is it dimus, meaning amhamon, that the general population, where the Amaretz, they don't give their Maserot. Now, Demai, so like we mentioned before, if I want to purchase from produce from an Amaretz, I have an obligation to go ahead right now and give Maaser Sheni. Technically, I have an obligation also to give Maaser Rishon. But I'm not going to give Maaser Rishon. Why am I not going to give Maaser Rishon to the Levi? But rather, I'm going to have to go ahead and give Trumat Maaser. What's Trumat Maaser? The 1%. Let's just show it to you over here. Trumat Maaser is the 10% that was supposed to be given from Levi, 10%, which is 1%, was supposed to really be given from the Levi to the Kohen. This Trumat Maaser is now placed upon me. So whenever we see over here that if I go and I purchase products from an Amaretz, which are Demai, I don't know if the Maaserot were given or not, no problem. He says over here, you should know, you have to give Maaser Sheni and Trumat Maaser. You're going to give 10% from what you were supposed to give to the Levi from the Maaser Rishon. Meaning to say you're only going to give 1%. So basically, Maaser Sheni, the 10% you're taking for yourself, and the 1%, you're going to have to go ahead and give it to the Kohen. Now, why am I not giving Maaser Rishon also? So the Mishnah is going to bring down, is going to explain to us this doubt that we have over here of the Mai, of the Amaretz, not separating the 10% correctly. We're only suspecting them, because the Mishnah is going to say majority of them do give it. Majority of the Amaretz, they do give it. So if they do give it, why are we going through this whole balagan? So he explains, no, because you have minority that they don't give it. You have minority that they don't give it. And since the minority, even though they're minority, they're not majority, we shouldn't even be concerned with them. But since their food is found in the marketplace, The Chacham went after the minority. We're afraid that you have a minority that did not give their ma'asarot. So therefore, when you're buying demai from an amaretz, meaning to say produce where we don't know if the 10% was given or not, in reality, maybe it's given. That's why we're telling you now, give yourself Maser Sheni 10%, and don't give the Maser Rishon to the Levi. Why? Because maybe he really gave it. It's only a doubt by the Chachamim. It's only a suffix. Since it's a suffix, why should I go ahead and give it to the Levi? But nevertheless, we're going to require you to give Trumot Maser, the 1%, to the Kohen. Okay, Rabotai, we're going to see all this right now. I'm going to go ahead and read it inside the Mishnah. Hopefully this made things easier. Okay, so the Mishnah begins in Perek Shvi'i, Mishnah Aleph. Shalosha sha'achlu ke'echad. Amid Kahati. Okay, now let me open up with the introduction. As usual, the Kahati brings it over here, a small introduction. Perek ze osek bihilchot hazimun lebirkat hamazon. This chapter deals with the laws of Zimun for Birkat Hamazon. Remember, what's the laws of Zimun? To invite. How do you invite? Nevarech shalchanu mishalom. Just as a small note, you guys should remember, whenever you learn Torah, there's a very big difference when you're trying to translate it into English or understanding it from one shot in Hebrew. When you're learning it in Lashon HaKodesh or even in Aramaic, when you're reading the Gemara, in your mind, you could even say it simply in Hebrew, even in Lashon HaKodesh. But when you have to go and translate, since when it comes to translation, there's many things that have to be plugged into that one word, a lot of times it can throw you off. That's if you take regular Shas, it's about this many books. If you take the article edition, it's about this many books, right? Anything that they translate, there's much more input that goes in. What am I trying to tell you? Try to go ahead and always try to remember. Don't just learn it one time. Try to remember the words. Because these things come back again. You'll see it in another book. You'll see it there. And little by little, that's how you pick up on your vocabulary. So, all right, if you see me saying Zimun, remember this going on this, okay? I like to make sure that people understand, but at the same time, I don't want to be able to go back and forth if it's already self-understood. So he said like this, Perek ze osek bihilchot hazimun the Birkat Hamazon. This chapter deals with the laws of Zimun for Birkat Hamazon. Mishnatenu ba lelamed matai chayevin b'zimun. Our Mishnah comes to teach us who is obligated in doing Zimun, umi hema mitzarfim lizimun, and who are you able to go ahead and join them to your Zimun. So that is the small introduction the Kahati brings down. Now the Kahati begins. Shalosha sha'achlu ke'echad. He says here, biyachad. If you have three people that they sat together to eat bread together, chayavin lezamen. They are obligated to do zimun. What does that mean? Levarech birkat azimun. They are obligated to bless the blessing of the zimun, which means levarech shalchanu mishalom. Kodem birkat hamazon, before saying birkat hamazon. Dahainu, which means to say, she'echad mazmin et chaverav liberacha. One of them, let's say Reuven and Shimon and Levi are sitting. Reuven has to go ahead and he has to invite his friend Shimon and Levi to the bracha. Ve'omer lahem, and he's going to say to them, Neva'arech she'alchanu mishalo. Let's bless from his food that we ate, meaning let's come and bless Hashem because we ate from his food. Ki muvar lahalam b'Mishnah Gimel, like it's going to be explained later on in Mishnah Gimel. So this is the way you do Zimun. This is point number one. In the Gemara they learn this, that you need to have three people when it comes to do Zimun, from the verse in Tehillim in chapter Lamed Daled, Pasuk Daled, that's chapter 34, verse 4. When the Pasuk says over there, Gadlu la Hashem iti, unarmamashemo yachdav, come and let's give greatness to Hashem's name with me, and let's make his name great together. So like I explained, Gadlu, or she's going to say it right now. He says, Echad omer l'rabim, one person is going to say too many. Gadlu, when it says Gadlu over here, umiyut rabim shtaim, whenever you have the minimum of plural, the minimum, when I say many people, the minimum of many people the minimum of many people can be two people. So it comes out here, hare sholosh, comes out here, you have three people. Gadul Hashem iti, come and let's make Hashem's name great with me. So that means this is two people, plural. The minimum of plural is two. So that's why you have over here 3 people. This is one pasuk. Or you could learn it out, Mina Katuv in Devarim Lamed Bet, pasuk Gimel. Or you could learn it out from this pasuk, Kishem Hashem Ikra, which is in Devarim in chapter 32, verse 3. Kishem Hashem Ikra, when I call out to Hashem's name, which is Ikra is I, that's number 1. Havu Gadol Elokenu, come and let's bring greatness to Hashem, our God. So you see over here, Havu again is plural. The minimum of plural is 2 people. So this is point number 1, Rabotai. Up to here, we've done this, and I just read it to you inside. So again, 3 people that ate together are obligated to do Zimun, which means to say Nevarech Shalchanim Shalo. One person says this to 2 people. From where do we know you have to have 3 people in order to be able to go ahead and bless Hashem by saying the Zimun? We know from the verse, Gadlul Hashem iti, or Kishem Hashem ikra, havu godel lelokeinu. Fine. Now we're moving on to the second point. Achal demai. A person ate demai. So now the Qadi is going to explain to us what is demai. Amei ha'aretz chashudin hayu al ha'asarot. The Am ha'aretz, again, I'm not going to go ahead and give you a specific definition because there are many ways to define Am ha'aretz, but the most simplest one, if you would just stick with that for now, is a person who does not learn Torah. And Am ha'aretz, Amei ha'aretz chashudin hayu al ha'asarot. The Am ha'aretz, the ignorant people, they were suspected on not giving their Maserot. By not giving Maser Sheni and Maser Rishon. Sheken Rabim Mahem Hayu Mikalim Al Atzmam, because many of them were lenient on themselves. V'lo hayu mefarshim mituvatan umiprotehem, and they would not separate from their wheat produce or from their fruit produce. Lo Maser Rishon v'lo Maser Sheni. They were not separate, not Maser Rishon and not Maser Sheni. They were lenient on themselves like that. Lefichach, therefore, Ka'avu ha'chamim, the Chachamim established, Sha'tevu'ah va'pirot shel Am ha'aretz demayhem. The Chachamim made a law. They said from now on, anybody who's going to go ahead and buy fruits or wheat produce from an Am ha'aretz, you should know it's demai. Koloimer, safek me'usarim. When we say that the produce is demai, it means to say that we have a doubt if the ma'asarot were given. Pirush hamilah demai. What is the understanding? What is the explanation of the word demai? So he says demai, ze mahu, right over here. Demai, ze mahu. What is this? Musar or lo musar? Is it were the 10% given or were the 10% not given? Again, Rabotai, you see what's the problem over here is when I say 10%, it's not really 10%. Over here has to be Maser Rishon and Maser Sheni. That's why when you say Ma'asarot, automatically you understand it's Maser Rishon, Maser Sheni. So then when I say Musar 10%, it's not only 10%. It's 10% to the Levi and 10% to himself. Was it given or was it not given? This is the way majority of the ones that want to explain the Mishnah, they want to explain Demai as the simplest term is Demai, Zemahu. What is this? This produce that I just bought home on Am ha'aretz, is it mu'usar or is it not mu'usar? V'yesh mefarshim, there are those that want to explain Demai meloshen dimui v'hirhur, that the word Demai comes from the language of imagination and hirhur, meaning sheyesh leharher acher tuvu'azu. You should go ahead and you should question this produce. Im hifrishu ma'asarotecha im lav. Did they separate the ma'asarot or not? He brings this down in the name of Malechet Shlomo b'Masechet Demai, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph. V'yesh me'evarim, so that was the second case, right? Demai dimui v'hirhur. Basically to say that, when a person, when he thinks about, like, you're basically questioning, is this food that I'm buying from the Am ha'aretz, this demai, was the ma'asarot given or not? This is another way you could learn it. Right here. Demai. Dimui v'hirhur. V'yesh mevarim shi milat yivanit. Some want to explain that this word comes from the Greek language, which is dimus. Umuvne am hamon. How are you going to understand this word dimus? It means am hamon Hayinu tuvuah shel amamon. It's wheat from the general populace. Here, demai dimus amamon. That we have wheat products, which is of the general populace, meaning from the Amma Aretz. He says this is brought down from Encyclopedia Talmudit Alpi Musiv Ha'aruch. Fine, he brings down the source from where he got it. Now, continues the Kahati back to the conversation. Amnam, however, he says, okay, before we get to this piece, let me just go one step back. Right now, we've been learning this whole time that an Amma Aretz, they don't give their ma'asarot. Not ma'asar rishon, not ma'asar sheni. So therefore, when I'm purchasing food from, meaning, hey, it could be even food. When I'm purchasing produce from them, automatically that produce that I'm purchasing is called demai. Let's just stick with this. Let's just stick with opinion number one. What is this? Were the ma'asarot given or were they not given? This is the way we suspect the Amma Aretz in not giving the ma'asarot. Nevertheless, comes the Mishnah now and he's going to tell you, even though we suspect the Amma Aretz not giving the ma'asarot, but you should know majority of them would go ahead and give it. Amnam, however, Rav Amei Ha'aretz Hayu Ma'asarim. However, majority of the Amei Ha'aretz, they would give the ma'asarot. They would do everything according to halakha. So if that is the case, so why we're making all this balagan over here? Aval, however, he says, Chachamim chashashu kan limi'ud. The Chachamim, they were concerned over here for the minority of the Amma Aretz. Ho'il v'hu mi'ud amatzui harbe. Since this minority is very much found, right, even though it's a minority, but their produce is very much found in the marketplaces. So therefore, he says over here, v'tiknu, and they instituted, shalokech tuvuah uperot me'am ha'aretz. Anybody's going to buy produce which is made out of wheat or fruits from an Amma Aretz, harehem demai, they're considered to be demai, meaning we don't know, we have a doubt, was the ma'asarot given or not? V'chayav lahafrish mahem misafik trumat ma'aser u'ma'aser sheni. You are obligated to go ahead and separate from them because we have a doubt if the ma'asarot were given or not. Since we have that doubt, you, the buyer, has an obligation to go ahead now and separate from that produce that you bought, the Trumat Maaser and Maaser Sheni. Remember this, yes? Trumat Maaser, not the Maaser Rishon. Maaser Rishon you're not giving because we have a doubt. Maybe they really did give, majority did give. So you're not giving the 10% to the Levi, no. She's going to give Trumat Maaser, which is really 1% from the 10% that you were supposed to give to the Levi. You're only going to give 1%, you're going to give to the Kohen, and then you're going to take for yourself Maaser Sheni 10%. So it comes out of here, Rabotai, you go to the store and you buy from an Amma Aretz demai produce, comes out you have to go ahead and give another 11% from the product that you just bought. Because we're afraid maybe he didn't do it. But remember, the 10% really is going back to you. But it's not so posh because this Maaser Sheni, you can't eat it outside of Yerushalayim. You have to take it to Yerushalayim. And there are also protocols. What happens if you can't go to Yerushalayim? There's ways that you could redeem the Maaser Sheni onto money and then take this money. Now you can't use it. You have to take this money, go to Yerushalayim and buy produce there. We'll see all this Bezrat Hashem as we go along. But don't think it's just so simple. Oh, I take 10% for myself, so therefore I have nothing to worry about. No, it's not so partial. This 10% of food, now it becomes basically chas v'shalom, like a burden on you, where you have to go out of your way and eat it in Yerushalayim. I could have sat down and have my bread in my own living room, correct? But now because of this guy, that I don't know if he gave or not the masarot, I have to take this bread and I have to go to Yerushalayim and I have to eat it there. Can you imagine, Rabotay, you want to eat something in your house, we're going to walk 3 hours and then eat it there. For what? What I could have done here. So really it does put a burden chas v'shalom on a person by buying produce of the Mai from an Amma Aretz. So he says, like we'll see all this Rabotai later on in Masechet of the Mai. But just want to make something clear. When a person buys the Mai from an Amma Aretz, he has to give Trumat Maser, which is the 1%. And he has to give Maaser Sheni, which is the 10%. Maaser Sheni has to be eaten in Yerushalayim. Trumat Maser belongs to the Kohen. Fine. Now comes the Kat, and now he's going to speak about the end of the Mishnah, and then he's going to tell us why the beginning of the Mishnah started the way it did. Mishnatenu Bala Shmiya. Our Mishnah comes to teach us later on in the end of the Mishnah. Shekol ha'ochel davar ha'asur b'achila. Anybody who eats something which is forbidden in consumption, for example, a person went ahead and he got himself a McDonald's cheeseburger. I don't know. He got himself a McDonald's burger. I don't know. He ate something that was asur. Or ha'ochel pachot mikazait. Or a person went ahead and he ate less than a kazait of bread. Or mishen yisrael, somebody who's not Jewish. And letzarfol zimun. We'll see this later on towards the end of the Mishnah B'li Neder. He's telling us like this. If Reuven, Shimon, and Levi are sitting right now together and they're eating bread, Reuven and Shimon, they both have kosher sandwiches. However, Levi, he went and he bought a hamburger from Wendy's. Can you include him in your zimun? No. Since he's eating forbidden food, you're not allowed to include him in your zimun. That's case number one. Case number two. What happens if Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, all of them are eating kosher sandwiches? But what? Reuven and Levi ate more than 1 ounce. They ate an ounce and more of bread. Because if you don't eat an ounce of bread, you can't say Birkat Hamazon. So they both ate 1 ounce of bread. But Shimon, he ate less than 1 ounce of bread. Can you include him in the zimun? No. What happens if Reuven, Shimon, and for example, let's say, a non-Jew Oscar is sitting over here. Can you include him to your zimun? Absolutely not. That's what the Mishnah is going to teach us later on. That these people you cannot join to your zimun, meaning you cannot join them to be one of the three in order to be able to say Nevarech Sha'alchanu Mishalom. Maram, however, he says, Bereish in the beginning, Monea Mishnah Anashim Shemazmanim Alhem. In the beginning of the Mishnah, it enumerates people that you are allowed to go ahead and do zimun on them. Even though there is like a prohibition in their eating, or maybe they have a blemish in themselves, as we will see this. Nevertheless, we're going to tell you you're allowed to go ahead and join them. When it says over Ke'en Isur Ba'achilatan, is one of the cases we're going to see is Demai. This case right here is Demai. Because remember, technically it's not really Asur. I would say it's like a prohibition, but it's not Chasram Asur. So because majority of them did give the Demai. So we don't know, so we want you to give it. What happens if a person went ahead and he bought Demai from an Aret, and he didn't give Trumat Maaser and Maaser Sheni, and he ate from this type of produce, he ate bread. Can you include him in your zimun? Yes, you can. Because this really, Rabotai, it's Asur, but it's not Asur. So that's what he tells us over here. So now the Mishnah begins, and he says like this, and this is what was taught in the Mishnah. Achal Demai, now we're understanding this second point of Achal Demai, if a person ate Demai. Achal Demai, if a person ate Demai, remember, let's just take to point number one. Demai, Zemahu, what is this? Musar lo Musar, if a person ate produce where we have a doubt if the Ma'asarot were given or not, V'lo ifrish mimenu et Ma'asarot, and you did not separate from it the proper Ma'asarot, which are Trumat Maaser and Maaser Sheni. If you did not go ahead and you did not separate the Trumat Maaser and the Maaser Sheni, Mutar letzarfol lizimun. This is the first concept we want to see with a person who you are able to go ahead and join him to your zimun of 3. Why are you able to go ahead and join him? Because in reality, majority of the Amaris, they do give Maaser. It's just because of the minority we're afraid. Like we mentioned above. So there he says, now, Lohi chimiru bo hachamim mishum asafik. So therefore the Chachamim were not stringent over here because of the suffix that we have in the Demai. Did they give? They did not give. Because of the suffix, we're not going to go ahead and we're not going to be stringent and tell you cannot join. But rather we're going to tell them you're allowed to go ahead and use them as number 3 in doing Zimun. That's what he tells over here. The Chachamim were not stringent because of the doubt in the Demai case when it came to joining him to our Zimun. But Rabotai, look how important it is to do Zimun. A lot of times you go to a Brit Milah, Bar Mitzvah, even weddings, people sit down to have bread, but a lot of them bench and they get up and they leave. That you're not allowed to. First you have to get 3 guys, do the Zimun. Again, first you have to do my Machronim, of course. Do the Zimun, bench Birkat Mazon, and only then can you go. Continues the mission, he says, V'amnam, however, mitam zeh, for this reason, that majority of the Ame'aratzim, they do give the Masorot properly. It's just, we're afraid because of the minority. Hikilo hachamim b'demai l'gabi aniyim. The hachamim were lenient with demai when it came with poor people. The amru, and they said, we'll see this in the Mishnayot of demai in Perek Gimel Mishnah Aleph. Ma'achalim et ha'aniyim demai. You're allowed to go ahead and you're allowed to feed the poor people demai. Again, same reason, because majority do go ahead and give. It's only the minority that don't give. He says, Ayin b'Gemara Masechet Berachot Daf Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. Rabotai, he says, look into the Gemara Masechet Berachot, page 47, side 1. Now, just we want to conclude with this, let's just do the one-liner basically on top of the Mishnah, and then in the following shiur, we'll continue with part 2. We'll start speaking about Maaser Rishon, Shenitla Trumoto, which is another concept we have to go ahead and explain Be'ezrat Hashem. So in Perek Shiv'i Mishnah Aleph, in chapter 7, Mishnah 1, the Mishnah began, Shelosha Sha'achlu Ke'echad Chayevim Lezamen. 3 people that ate together as one, they are obligated to do Zimun. Achal Demai, what happens if the guy went ahead and he ate Demai without giving the proper Maserot? He didn't give Trumat Maser to the Kohen, and he didn't take Maser Sheni for himself. Can you go ahead and join him? Can you use him for one of the 3 people to be able to do Zimun? Yes, you are allowed to go ahead and use them. Rabotai, have a great day. Baruch Adonai L'Olam. Amen.